Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And today we've been to see Gladiator II.
Yay.
Another long-awaited sequel to a film from yesteryear. I was kind of thinking, I mean, first of all, I really enjoyed this. I think you did too. Yeah. But I was sort of thinking, this is just the world we're in now, where everything, even the good ones, like Blade Runner 2049, everything is still just bringing back the nostalgia of a previous generation, a previous film. You know, there's so much this going on. Even the good ones are doing it.
Well, yes, obviously. I mean, any sequel will draw on the previous one. And this one, I think, follows the structures really quite closely in a way.
Yeah, super closely. We're not getting into spoilers too soon. But
yeah. But I thought it really was spectacular. It was exciting. You know, Denzel Washington is my favorite movie star, and he is superb. You know, I think Pedro Pascal is fantastic as well, and underrated, right? Because all the attention has gone to Paul Mescal. Paul Mescal is a real star-making performance. I mean, he is obviously a star of a certain kind, but he's terrific in this, and this is going to make him a huge international star. So it has all of those elements, really. And it has the spectacle, and it just looks terrific. Actually, the first scenes, I was thinking, who's done the color, what do you call it? Color grading for it, because, you know, the skies were just so terrific looking and consistent and so on. So I think this is a film of many pleasures. I don't think it's like a great masterpiece. I have a few niggles about it, you know, kind of things that I think could have been better, right? But it is a terrific film.
Huge amount of fun. It moves at a great lick. I think one of the things that gives it kind of an extra degree of credibility than other sort of nostalgia, reboot projects might have, is that it's Ridley Scott directing again. You know what I mean?
I do.
There's something to it that, like, there is a genuine way to continue this story and continue because the thing is, at the start, I hadn't seen any trailers. I don't think I'd seen any trailers. I'd read very little about it, and just reading on like Google just now, like you Google Gladiator 2, and the first thing that comes up is something that I considered a twist. You know, it's certainly presented as a bit of a twist, and we'll get into it in a minute. But like, I get the feeling that it's kind of common knowledge to some degree. Like, it seems to have been in one of the trailers. Google will tell you immediately. But the thing is, at the start, I'm going like, how is there gonna be a continuation of the story, right? Like, you know, Maximus died at the end of the first one, and that's done and dusted. But they have found a way to continue the story. We do have characters come back from the previous films. You know, Derry Jacobi's there, and so the Senate kind of, you know, we see one or two actors come back, and
Connie Nielsen.
And Connie Nielsen. So there's a story, you know, relationship. But I was glad to find out that, like, there was a real way of continuing this story, which they have found. Shall we maybe say this is the spoiler?
Yeah.
Because the spoiler is that Paul Mescal's character, who is like Maximus was in the first film, a general, although he's not a general of Rome, he's a general of like a North African barbarian sort of horde. He loses a battle. Is taken gladiator, or taken prisoner, and he's bought as a gladiator by Denzel Washington's character. And over the course of the film, obviously he has this grudge to bear against Rome because they killed his wife and took his people and everything. But what you learn is that he is actually the illegitimate son of Maximus and Connie Nielsen's character, who is named... What is her name?
Lucilla, I think.
Lucilla, yeah. And this was the Lucius character who was a little boy that you saw in the first film, and he met Maximus, and the film is not afraid of showing you clips and, you know, bringing back, you know, images of Russell Crowe and young Lucius and so on. And what I liked about the way that the twist worked is that as soon as it implies this could be the kid, you know, because for me the first implication was when you saw a flashback that Lucius had of him as a young boy being told to leave Rome, or being found by the barbarians. We don't know at that point what his parentage is. I'm like, are there only little blonde-haired boys in this world? And you go, oh no, this is the same little blonde-haired boy. That's what it reveals later. But what I liked is that it doesn't treat it as a massive, massive twist. It kind of comes out quite quickly. And everyone just learns it. And
I mean, I thought it was expected because the last bit of dialogue, I think, in the original Gladiator film is this acknowledgement that he and Lucilla have a child, and it's like, keep him safe. And
it was Lucius's safe. And you see that again in this film.
So, kind of that... I don't think it was a big secret, and it's a logical kind of continuation of the story. So, I mean, obviously the suspense or the excitement or the curiosity is how will the narrative reveal it. Yeah, and then, of course, there's an interesting twist here because, the mother recognizes it almost right away. The son refuses to acknowledge it, has this anger and this hatred, but there's a moment where you realize, well, maybe he doesn't remember. Yeah, maybe it's not just that he's refusing to acknowledge, but that things have happened. And now, of course, it's revealed that he does remember everything. And
yeah, no, that to be fair wasn't a question for me. Once I realised that's what was going on, I thought, no, he remembers and and there's a purpose and everything. But what I liked about the twist, as I say, is that it doesn't. Once it really puts it in your head, this is a possibility, it doesn't then try and keep you guessing for a long time. Actually, you could say you make a relationship to the Blade Runner sequel as well, because there's a huge thing in that about whether the Ryan Gosling character is Deckard's son, and that has like kind of huge implications, and it's built into the fabric of that film, the thing about his memories and finding out that they're real and so on. Here, not like that at all, right? About 2 minutes after it's brought up, it's made very, very clear. And it's not treated as like I say, a huge twist. It's a development of the story.
What I liked is that it's spectacular. It's a big scale cinema that feels really old fashioned in the best sense. Yeah, that the image is peopled with people. Yeah, and things happening and things to see and to look for in a vast frame. I also like that you're always orientated. I mean, I love watching the action here because you always know kind of where the arrows are going and what they're responding and kind of actions are completed. And then I also liked that it has an emotional dimension. It's a family kind of narrative, and also it has a political dimension. It's kind of about what world do you want, and kind of. Yeah. So it has all of those things kind of, I think, really well integrated together.
Well, I mean, I was thinking of Megalopolis at the end as well. Not just because obviously Megalopolis is incredibly Roman, but it ends with a plea for a better world, which I thought in Megalopolis is like makes perfect sense because it's wild and it's sci-fi and it's utopia and all the rest of it. Whereas here, I thought like it did strike me as kind of odd, even though I think it plays well. When right at the end, Lucius is talking to the two armies who might still face off against each other and say, this is what Rome was meant to be, or we should build what Rome was meant to be, and are we going to spill any more blood and so on and so forth. And I'm kind of thinking, but I know how ancient Rome went. It fell, it's fantasy, this bit, Well, I mean, I'm not asking for like historical accuracy, and Ridley Scott has been criticised for that all sorts. And when we saw Napoleon recently, or whenever it was out, there was the thing about shooting cannonballs into the pyramids. It's like, I don't fucking care. That's what I want to see on screen. So like, I don't mind historical inaccuracy. It just struck me as kind of odd though in the context of real quote unquote ancient Rome.
Well, I mean, I don't know, because actually in comparison to what came after, which was the barbarian invasions, this was kind of like a model of, I suppose, democracy in quotation marks, because obviously, kind of only citizens had rights. Anyway, a state for citizens, though, with all the historical kind of problems of who is defined as such. And, kind of, this was the period before the so-called Dark Ages, right? So I wouldn't quibble about that too much.
No, it's not a quibble. It just played us a little bit odd. Maybe it's because he's talking to armies instead of the people at that point, He's pleading with the army at this point, let's all settle down and rebuild Rome and so on. Because he says it's supposed to be for the people, but the people don't get a voice at that point.
Well, but they revolted in the stadium and they sacrificed their lives and they'd had enough.
I know.
And you see, I think there are resonance, to the world, like, very interestingly, for this kind of spectacle, and I don't remember it in the original Gladiator. I mean, this is a film that's full of beggars and poverty and disease, and yeah, every time you go in and out of Rome, you have kind of desperate people begging for food.
Yeah, sure.
Right. I mean, I do think that it's a, it's a reflection to a degree of our times, and it's speaking to them, I think, quite overtly. Yeah. In ways that might seem simplistic or whatever, but that were rousing.
Yeah, no, I don't mind it being simplistic. I think, you're painting big strokes in a film like this. I think the first film did that as well. I mean, it's basically, this is giant sort of epic soap opera stuff.
You know what I also like is that it's a film about being a man. I mean, I know, for example, from speaking to students, that Gladiator is a film that lots of fathers and sons see together. Yeah. And I was thinking about that when watching this one, because, unlike other films that, because pretty much every film that stars, a man is in some way about masculinity, right? Because, it's about, how to be a superhero or whatever. Right? But I think what distinguishes this film is that what's at stake is how to be a good man, how to be a moral man. Yeah, how, what duties and responsibilities you have. Yeah, kind of bonds of affection and kind of filial bonds and kind of, responsibilities to a place or a community or an idea as well. Yeah, that kind of, those other films don't have.
So, I think it's sort of interesting that Pedro Pascal's character, who is this general, this Roman general, who, like I say, led this siege that you see at the start of the film, that Paul Mescal ends up being taken prisoner in. We only see him really as a general who is tired of war, sick of it, and doesn't seem to like. Again, this is something that I think it just plays in a slightly odd way to me. That, like, we meet this guy by the point that he is tired of this, and he's seen too much bloodshed and so on, and he's thinking about what Rome should be and what it is under these two emperors, these brothers who are dreadful, and obviously, I think they are based on real people, but there's a huge amount of like Caligula in them too.
Yeah, I had that's one of my niggles.
But I was kind of thinking, like, I wish, I actually kind of don't believe his character as someone who could have become a great general, who would have loved war enough to do that. Like, I think that's what you needed, and I just don't see it in him.
Oh no, I do. I think it's terrific. I think you see it at the beginning and you see it in the fight, and really, kind of the narrative explains it. Like, he's probably 50 by then. He's been fighting all his life. What he really wants is his wife and to spend time with his wife. He's just won a fantastic victory in North Africa, and his reward is then to go and conquer India and Iran, right? Like, which
I get it.
Is not what he wants.
Yeah.
Right?
I get it completely on the page, like I say, as I've just explained, like, that's his motivations and his thoughts, but there's something about the feeling of it that I just don't buy.
Well, I like it, you see, because I think it's important that character, in order to play off against Paul Mescal's rage, he's got to exude kindness and strength. And I think Pedro Pascal exudes that. Yeah, he exudes kindness, and he also exudes a kind of strength. Yeah, he's got that face and that body.
yeah.
So I think his is an underrated performance, because, of course, Denzel Washington is so theatrical and terrific, and he gets responses out of line readings and gestures, and he's absolutely fantastic.
It's kind of Machiavellian Iago figure.
Yeah, he's got a great role, and he's fantastic in it, but it's a very showy role.
Sure.
And then, of course, you have Paul Mescal, who's the star, and it's all action and the way that he's filmed, and again, it's the central showy performance. And Pedro Pascal is on the side, but I think his performance is the balance to the glue and the balance to all the rest, really.
I had a minor issue in the same sort of vein with Paul Mescal's performance, honestly, because I think he's so good, and he looks just right for this. And there are so many things
He's
that
got
doing.
a Roman face, doesn't he?
Yeah,
he really does.
And there's so many things that he's doing just right. But there is, again, there's something about an X factor that and maybe it's unfair, but I was comparing him to some extent to Russell Crowe in Gladiator, because the roles are so similar. And as you said, the story and everything is just it's copying to such a heavy degree. And I was thinking the charisma that he had, because they had the same sort of rage, and obviously he'd lost. I mean, he had a much more personal grudge with the emperor he was trying to kill in that, because he'd known him and everything. Whereas here, this is just a general who he doesn't know, but who has killed his wife, or who has led the invasion that killed his wife. I think that the film doesn't bed in nearly enough how much he feels the loss of his wife. You see it and you get it on page, and I just don't feel it for the rest of the film.
Oh, I do.
And there is some X factor in Paul Mescal's performance that I think is not communicating the rage that he's meant to feel. I really liked when Denzel Washington's character explains why he bought him, or what he sees in him as a gladiator, and what he sees in him is rage. And then most of the rest of the film, I'm just not feeling it, to the point where when he finally gets his chance to take down Pedro Pascal, which is what he told you at the start, he's the guy I'm looking for. I'm not feeling like that intro to that scene should be so big, and I wasn't feeling it.
Well, I did, and actually the whole film begins with that. It begins with he and his wife kind of putting on each other's armor, and you really feel kind of the love and what this woman means to him. In fact, what they mean to each other. So I think that's kind of built in right at the very beginning of the film. And then the film returns to it, right? Because all his dreams and his images and, kind of are about that. And even, the coddling of the arrow that she was killed with and so on. I think kind of, I felt it. I felt his feelings about all of that. So
no, that's fair enough. I mean, I saw it. I didn't feel it. And like I said, I think the thing that I really didn't feel was the rage that we are told explicitly is what he's all about. And I don't feel it from him.
Yeah.
He has different kind of charisma. He has a kind of friendly charisma that he has with his compatriots, who, the gladiators who he makes friends with and so on, turns into a kind of, a union together almost. I feel that, and he has charisma there. But like I say, there's something else that I think he's lacking. And when you say it's like a global star making kind of thing, I just don't quite see it. Maybe it will be.
We'll see.
Realistically,
my feeling is absolutely.
People do love him, right? And so if you, in popular eye, he's gaining a kind of big profile. But whether I think he should on the basis of the performance, that's an issue.
I do, and actually one of the key things always is, because he's proven himself in these. In the television series Normal People, but also in small indie films that are about relationships or, people being so lost and so on that they commit suicide, really. But not everybody who can do that kind of characterization can then do action. Right, and in this film, he proves he can do action.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So he'll be an action hero, and he's charismatic, and he's good looking, but in kind of an ordinary way. So he's got a very particular face. I mean, he does look like the profile of a Roman coin, actually. Yeah, but he's got what I think is a kind of a star-making kind of combination of looking ordinary and looking really great. Yeah,
I get it. You could see him in the pub.
Yeah, you could. Yeah. So I think for all of those reasons, I think this will catapult him into another level of stardom, really, and well deserved. He's terrific. So I really liked all of that. My niggles were the emperors. So I have two political niggles, really. Kind of, I'm fed up of seeing all these corrupt, diseased idiots, be gay, right? And I really hated that. Yeah, kind of. I don't see why you have to be gay to be kind of syphilitic and childish and stupid, and powerless and.
Can I raise my hand in? Sort of, I didn't see them as that. Do you think it was explicit or coded?
I was explicit.
Was it?
Yeah.
Did I miss it?
The syphilitic guy had his slave boy next to him all the time when they were holding court in the.
I honestly
Senate.
didn't see it. Maybe I was looking at his monkey all the time, but I honestly didn't.
Well,
fair enough.
kind of he's there, with his shirt off and the curly hair and
Okay.
kind of, and so I just I thought there's got to be another way of conveying corruption, right, than to make the character gay, right? Like, and actually the other niggle, which again I think is something that I was, surprised to see, because Denzel Washington is so terrific, right? And, so there's this revelation at the end of the film that he was a slave, and that all his maneuverings have been, to gain enough power, right, to become the slave owner, right? So there was that interesting phrase in the film where, a slave, and I forget who it's by, it was Cicero or somebody like that, that a slave dreams not of freedom, but of owning his own slave.
Yeah,
right.
Sure.
So there's a whole thing there about that. And then, there's the revelation that Denzel is a slave, he's got the mark, and then of course what happens in the film is you kill the slave, right? And actually I think, certainly for a Black American audience, that's bound to have other kinds of repercussions, right? Like, that kind of, I don't know how to resolve, but make me uncomfortable. That, so Denzel, the black slave, is then killed for any ambition, and he's rendered evil to have even had those ambitions, right? Like, I just think it's a really dodgy conceptualization of that character.
That's interesting.
I mean, I don't know what to make of it more than that. I haven't thought it through, but it kind of...
Yeah, it's interesting.
And actually, I think it's interesting that the film is, to me, relatively thoughtless on that axis of representation of both, what the repercussions are for a particular kind of homosexual representation and what the repercussions are for a kind of a black slave characterization.
Well, it did occur to me early on that, like, this could be really interesting. Denzel Washington as a slave owner, and particularly owning a white slave, who obviously he says at one point, "I'm not your slave, I'm your gladiator. I still have my own will." But he owns him, right? And I was thinking, this could be really interesting. And then it sort of ends up not being. And it's not that it's like especially hugely done. It just doesn't put it. There's no thought in it.
I think it's misjudged because I think what they should have done is make Denzel Washington the enabler and the support of Paul Mescal's ascent rather than to make him the nemesis. I mean, he already has enough nemesis, right? The general and the twin emperors, right? Kind of, and the jailer, kind of. You could have made Denzel Washington a wily character playing both sides, but kind of ultimately betting on the Paul Mescal character.
I mean, he plays very well as a villain. Like, he's wonderful.
Yeah, he's wonderful.
And I do think as the idea of him, if you forget race for a minute, the idea of him having this long-term grudge and finding his ways to use everything and every person at his disposal to work his way not just to being a slave owner but to the top, and to engineer a way to get himself in charge of Rome so he can take it down. It's this kind of huge generational grudge that he's got. It's wonderful, and like huge amounts of that play really well. But I also think you've got a point I hadn't really thought about. Feels like the film hadn't really thought about either.
What did you think of, so this is the type of film that is really dotted by, these set pieces, right? And they almost all take place in the Colosseum, aside from the very beginning, the battle at the very beginning,
Again, just like the first film, you start off with a war scene, and then everything else is happening in the Colosseum.
In the Colosseum.
Yeah.
But what did you think of these scenes?
I thought they were brilliant. I loved them. I mean,
Yeah, I did too.
I mean, I remember them from the first film so fondly. You know, the tiger attacking him and the helmet with the face bit that comes down and stuff. Like, there are images that I really remember. And there's going to be stuff from this. You know, and the thing about flooding the Colosseum, you know, and everyone's going, what the fuck? Because you did see that in the trailer. I do remember seeing that in the trailer. And people going, that's bollocks. And then it turned out there is some historical source for like that actually being a thing that happened. It's like, but even if it wasn't, like, fuck it, it seems like the kind of thing that could happen in Rome, you know. And it's absolutely brilliant to see it. It's a nutty sort of set of images to see these boats swimming around in the Colosseum. But I mean, that stuff all played really, really well to me. I'm like, this is what I'm here for. And I didn't feel shortchanged by any of it. Some of it was more gory than I expected it to be. You know, because I think I think films are sort of, they're always going for like the 12A racing. So I didn't think of what they're going to take out. But no, I felt happy with the level of blood and guts.
Yes,
which is exactly what I wanted.
I thought the action sequences were exciting. They were imaginative. The only thing that I still liked it, but it felt was, you know, the monkeys at the beginning. They felt too CGI.
I agree with you on this. Yeah. I thought this at the time. There were one or two shots. In fact, maybe even some of the boats at the start, because the film was obviously so loaded with CGI. And Ridley Scott has made he's one of the kind of directors who will just come out and say, like, I just use it all the time. You have to use it all the time. In fact, not unlike some of his previous comments about casting, about race, when he made the film Exodus, which we both really liked. And people were criticising him for kind of casting white and all these roles. And he's like, if you don't do this, you don't get your film made. You know, so it's like, so he's very upfront about like the practicalities of filmmaking.
But also, the film has been publicised as having less CGI, that a lot of those effects were done live. Right. You know, that the place was flooded, that there were actually thousands of extras, and it wasn't just like, you know, cartoons drawn in.
Okay, well, I'd like to see more about that, because obviously,
and I think,
any shot, any like aerial shot of Rome is just, you know, it's purely painted on. So, but I'd like to see.
I mean, according to the publicity, anyway. You know, there were thousands of extras, not just. Well,
we'll see what publicity says, because publicity says an awful lot. I mean, it's funny that back when CGI was emerging in the 1980s, you had like Tron. But they were saying, like, this one's got loads of CGI everywhere, because it's the brand new thing. And most of that was done practically, like the lights on the sets and things. Huge amount of practical effects. And these days, it's the other way around. You say, no, we didn't use CGI at all. This was all done practically. And of course, there's CGI in every single frame.
No, of course.
Yeah,
but, so, but it's a question of degree and so on. I do think that when you watch all the extras, I mean, the frame is kind of peopled with people, like I said earlier. And you can tell they are people, right? Whereas, you know, you watch a television series, in a Colosseum scene, and you could tell that they're just like, I mean, they're not even painted on. They're kind of like dots, really. Yeah, they're kind of, it's visible. Whereas I think in this, you could really tell that it was people.
Well, to go back to the original point you were bringing up, which was about the monkeys in that first Colosseum scene.
Yes.
I think actually what this speaks to is that CGI is better. This will sound really, really basic and dumb. CGI is better when you have a lot of time to work on it. And visual effects teams get hardly any time these days. They're put under enormous amounts of pressure. You know, this all kind of really emerged about 10, 15 years ago when Life of Pi came out, because they won the Oscar for Best Visual Effects, a company called Rhythm and Hughes, which did the tiger in that film. And like the day that they won that Oscar, they filed for bankruptcy, something like that. I'm not half remembering it, but that's the sort of thing. Like, visual effects companies, they get their budget up front, and everything has to come out of that. Then there's never, so, you know, we'll say we'll want 150 shots, and then that'll turn into 200 shots, that'll turn into 250, and we want all these redone, and everything still comes out of that first budget. There's a huge amount of financial pressure. They don't get time. They don't get, you know, there's so many visual effects artists who do stuff for Marvel that have complained about this. And I think what you see is that when you get enough time, which like Avatar 2 had, they had 7 years to do that, and it looked impeccable. You couldn't see a flaw in anything. I kind of think that the monkeys in this, they just speak to not quite enough time was given to really embed those into the image.
This is a film that has reputedly, the budget is between 250 and 350 million. Yeah, and it has 1 star in what could be called a supporting part. So, I'm not sure that Denzel would be getting his usual, kind of starring salary for this. I.e., above the line costs are probably, kind of relatively underplayed in comparison to, what was spent in the rest of the production. And I think the money's on the screen.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
So
I'm just saying that I agree with you. There are 1 or 2 points where you go, "Oh, that looks like a cutscene from a PlayStation 3 game," and that shouldn't really be looking like that. And I do think because the same thing happens with Marvel. I mean, obviously Marvel spends shitloads on its actors and everything, but those films all cost 100, 150, $200 million, and you do get things with those where you go, "Oh, I'm not sure about that."
well, that's true.
So
So it's on a spectrum, and it's a question of degree. Yeah, but kind of reputedly, they built a real tank for the Colosseum boat sequences, and they had thousands of extras.
Yeah,
which
and it does look
is
fantastic.
Which kind of, as you say, any film, even a low budget film now, will have lots of CGI, lots of special effects. So kind of that's a given of kind of contemporary digital filmmaking. But this is, I think, amongst the best looking and most exciting of the spectacles I've seen, really.
Yeah. So, quibbles aside, and I don't think this is the great masterpiece. I mean, it's funny actually when you say great masterpiece. The original wasn't a great masterpiece. It was a brilliant, ripping yarn.
Oh,
it had everything.
I think the original was kind of an extraordinary film, really, and a testament to it is that it's lasted. And as I said, you often hear it's a film that kind of fathers and sons see together. Yeah, it's kind of almost like a Godfather type thing. People know lines and scenes and they recite. I mean, it's a film that's had an impact in the culture, and I think for really good reasons.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I wasn't trying to talk it down in that sense. I was thinking more in comparison, because I think even at the time I do sort of remember a certain degree of like, is this the greatest film of the year, or is it I don't know, like, because it was Best Picture nominated. Was it Best Picture, in fact?
I don't
or was
know.
it just nominated? What year was it? 2000? Hold on. It did win Best Picture. Yeah.
Did it? Okay.
So maybe that's what I was kind of remembering, was people sort of saying, like, is it as great as a Best Picture needs to be? Or is it just, a really excellent film of its type, sort of thing? But anyway, it did win Best Picture. Steven Soderbergh won Best Director. Ridley Scott was nominated. Soderbergh won for Traffic. So maybe, but it's not at that level, Gladiator 2. But it continues the story in ways that work, and everything about the film essentially works.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I think it's one of the most exciting films I've seen this year.
It's great fun.
So I highly recommend. I think people will have a great time. It's a really timely film in the sense that I'm hoping it will bring people back to the cinema. It's definitely a film that you need to see in a cinema. It was spectacular to see it on IMAX. Thank you very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on.
Oh, what are we on? We're on Apple Podcasts, Audible, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and YouTube Podcasts. I think that's the right name of everything, because they will fucking change. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies for as long as Twitter lasts. It's dying right now. And Blue Sky, eavesdropping.bsky.social, which is where everyone's migrating to. And the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much for listening.
Bye-bye.